Thank you all for joining us for the late afternoon session. Appreciate your endurance. Shout outs. So my name is Toch. I am the founder and director of Future Ed, which is a nonpartisan think tank, education think tank based at Georgetown University. And it is my pleasure to moderate this afternoon's conversation on private schools choice generally and the forthcoming federal scholarship program, tax credit scholarship program in particular. And I'm standing up here because I have a bad back. Otherwise, I'd be sitting. Since 2022, Republicans in 17 states educating nearly 15% of the nation's students have passed laws allowing any family, regardless of their income, to pay for private schooling with tax dollars. The Trump administration's One Big Beautiful Bill Act, signed by the president last July 4th, would create a comparable scholarship program at the federal level beginning in 2027. The Treasury Department has yet to issue regulations for the program, so there are unanswered questions about how it's going to function. But the program could give families substantial funds to pursue education privately, a dramatic shift in federal education policy, and one that raises many questions for state and local policymakers, public and private school operators, and companies providing educational services. To help us answer these questions, or at least explore them, because it's unclear what all the answers will be yet, we're joined by three education policy experts. To my far left is Jonah Edelman, who many of you know as the founder and chief executive of Stand for Children, an organization that advocates for school improvement, and one that shouldn't be confused with Stand Together, which is a philanthropic and advocacy organization founded by Charles Koch. Jorge Elorza, to my left, is chief executive of Democrats for Education Reform, an education advocacy organization, and he's also the former two-term mayor of Providence, Rhode Island. And in the middle is my friend Lindsay, who is founder and chief executive of the education consulting firm Lodestone, DC, and she is a former Republican education staffer in the U.S. House and Senate. So we're going to have what I think is a lively conversation about private school choice and the new federal program. Topics, I think it goes without saying, that engender very different points of view among people who share a commitment to students' best interests. And then we'll take your questions and get your insights and include them in the conversation. We want to help you understand the new federal program and its implications for your work. So I think it would be helpful to get your sense, or get a sense of your perspectives on this issue. So how many of you are public sector educators, either in traditional school districts or charter schools? Okay, not that many, thank you. How many of you are private sector operators or entrepreneurs? Couple. What's everybody else doing? And how many of you are policymakers? Okay. Funders? Wow, a lot of funders. Interesting. It is, just parenthetically, I have heard that the funding community writ large is very interested in this issue because it's going to represent a great deal of challenges to your giving. And so I'm glad to see you're here. Let's paint a quick picture before we start our conversation of how the federal program works. So I'm going to run through this as quickly as I can. So it's funded through individual annual charitable donations of up to $1,700 made to nonprofit scholarship granting organizations, or SGOs. Remember that term, they are pivotal to this program. The donations are eligible for dollar federal tax credits, not deductions, credits. So states must opt into the program every year, and it launches on the 1st of January next year, and it has no end date. While the federal tax credits are capped at $1,700, there's no limit on the number of families that can donate to the program in return for tax credits, and families may contribute year after year. As a result, there's no limit to the amount of money flowing into the program or the number of scholarships that might result. The cap is projected, the $1,700 cap is projected to keep the program's 10-year cost to the federal treasury below $26 billion. Some estimate or predict, really, that the program will generate much more money than that. It remains to be seen. Eligibility for the scholarships is limited to families earning no more than 300% of the median income in their counties. And that covers about 90% of U.S. families and translates into family incomes as high as $450,000 a year in some of our most affluent counties, including Montgomery County in Maryland, just outside of the District of Columbia. Any student eligible to enroll in a public elementary or secondary school may receive the scholarships, and that includes public charter, private, parochial, and homeschooled students. Eligible expenses range from tuition to room and board, to tutoring, to special ed services, books, supplies, transportation, test prep, and computers, and probably other things as well. The way it works, just very briefly, is that donors designate their funds to SGOs, and there seemingly may be an unlimited number of these SGOs, that then decide the size of the scholarships that they dispense, how and to whom they distribute scholarships, and where families that receive scholarships may purchase services. Individuals in one state may designate their scholarship contributions to an SGO in another state, and SGOs must grant scholarships to 10 or more students who aren't in the same school, which is designed to to eliminate self-dealing, and they must spend 90% of the donations that they receive on scholarships. And as I said at the outset, the U.S. Treasury will issue draft regulations for the program in the coming weeks or months, and then final regulations ahead of the January 1st, 2027 launch date. So in brief, that's how the program works. So Lindsay, let's start the conversation with you. What's the rationale for the federal program? And from your vantage point, what's its promise?
Well, nice to see everybody, and thanks for the question, that overview. So at a very basic level, Congress included the federal scholarship tax credit to create a national mechanism for expanding educational opportunity without creating a new federal education program, which could get mired in bureaucracy. So to be clear, this is not a traditional federal program. It's indirect, as in it's donor funded. It's incentive based, as in it rewards private giving, not mandating public spending for choice, which we've seen in states with things like ESAs. And it still relies on states to implement, which I think is an important point. But generally, it's designed to leverage private giving to increase education options for families. Tom listed out the many uses of funds that this could support. And it also presupposes that it not only learning in the school day in a brick and mortar building that will yield student success. There's other options outside of school that can help students learn. I actually don't call this a school choice tax credit. I think that that's too narrow of a frame for where the field is going. And this is less about where a student goes to school, in my opinion, and more about whether they can access the opportunities that they need. Education is becoming more unbundled, right? And we've seen that every day, and families are thinking about it that way. So the Republicans believe that they were winning the argument around unbundled education opportunities, so they passed this after many years of debate, and they may be right, but Jorge and I were just talking, Democrats who opt into this could end up reclaiming the narrative on some of this issue if it works, and there's a lot of questions on that. We've seen tax credits, education savings account, choice opportunities explode across the states in recent years. I was looking at some polling this morning, then a recent poll from YouGov on behalf of the Yes Every Kid Foundation found that 72% of families believe they should be able to customize K-12 education to meet the needs of their children, but only a small minority believe today's K-12 system can do that level of customization, which I think is interesting. So Tom, you asked about the promise. I think a couple of key points. This is new money that will go directly to support education. It doesn't take a dime from existing schools. It's additive and unlocks new funding streams at a scale that many states could not generate on their own. It's also a way to expand access to customized education pathways, or education pluralism, I call it. And it helps break the cycle of tying opportunities to geographic and income. And then lastly, I think another major promise of this over time is scalability. I'm under no illusion that this is going to be perfect in year one. It's going to take time, as we know things in education do. But because the model is incentive-based and leverages private contributions, I do think that there could be significant new funding that doesn't have large new federal bureaucracy or requirements. But there will be some implementation challenges. I'm clear-eyed about that, and we can talk about that for sure.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Lindsay. So, Jorge, DEFR, the organization you lead, was created to support the public charter school sector. But you've been a vocal supporter of the forthcoming federal private school choice program. Why is that?
So, the direct answer to that is that, my organization, we are not ideological about anything other than what delivers and what gets the job done for kids. And we support whatever works. In a moment where, as we believe, there is a nationwide crisis in K-12, kids need more supports, not less, why would we turn down additional resources? Particularly when those resources are going to go to support public school kids. So, I've been in so many rooms over the years where, folks on the left, myself included, rightfully complain or rightfully make the case that our country seems to always find the money for other priorities, but never for education. And for the first time in a long while, there is new money for education. And because of that, I think it just behooves us to figure out how we use these dollars to support the kids that need it the most. That's the approach that we've taken, and as we've mentioned many times, I just think this is a no-brainer. We've been asking for this for a long time. When you look at the range of eligible uses, this helps to advance our own priorities, the issues that Democrats ourselves have championed over the years. Why would we not see this as an opportunity?
All right, fair enough. And we're going to explore in a minute some of the complexities that are built into that sort of view. But Jonah, I want to get your sense of the prospects and the perils of the new program.
Hey, everybody. So, Tom, thanks for facilitating. Jorge and Lindsay, good to be with you. I don't think the prospects are great for the new program. That doesn't mean that I think it's something that I think it's worth taking whatever advantage there is potentially to take. But I'm very skeptical of rhetoric that seems, florid, some of which has already been shared, about this being some huge opportunity. And I feel like I hate being in this position because my whole career is about, innovation and about improvement and, trying new things. But, I feel like looking at the past is a really important component to assessing what might happen. And there's a lot of pause that it gives me, Tom. When you look at the experience of states that we work in, like Arizona, with ESAs, and discussions I've literally had directly with Republican leaders in that state who are good people who admit to me, and I won't name them, that they wish there could be some accountability and transparency. And they admit that there's a fundamental flaw with universal ESAs, and that there essentially is no guardrails, and that they couldn't win that in their caucus. And you're seeing that over and over. And so just the lack of accountability and transparency here is concerning. I think the notion of it not bringing bureaucracy, Lindsay, is an interesting one. Certainly it won't create a federal bureaucracy, but there's a lot of rigmarole. It's an extremely wasteful, leaky delivery system. If you're trying to actually fund something, provide the money directly to the thing. And you could provide it at whatever level. But to give tax credits to people and then have to have intermediaries set up, and then the big winners here are going to definitely be the payment processing companies. They're unabashedly going to win. But the question of whether kids ever get the money, particularly low-income kids, and the last thing I just say is maybe people in this room are not old enough to remember NCLB. Maybe some are. I'm just giving you all the credit, benefit of the doubt. There's some, there's some young people here, a few. All right. But there was this, remember the thing called SES? Yes. Does anyone think that was a great success? I mean, some of you probably directly experienced, were either in services that got money, or you're in districts that were deciding who to get money, or you're authorizers in Congress and you're trying to figure out how to make it better. It's very, very hard in the out-of-school sector to distribute money in a way that's impactful. So at best, this is an incredibly leaky, inadequate, recreation of that, in my opinion. So, and so I just would like to hear, I don't want it to be that, but this is the thing that I'm really wondering about, how it actually plays out.
So this is now law. It is an imperfect program, and the approach that we've taken and that we urge the broader community to take is, let's take the program that we have and make it work as well as possible. There are innumerable ways where this can go wrong. I actually do not disagree with that. But it's part of this broader argument that we've been making about not just the state of education advocacy, but the state of the Democratic Party. We've been having such a small conversation on K-12 education for the past 10 years. Little risk-taking. We're overly cautious. We're overly mindful of what this powerful stakeholder or what this powerful group might want. We've been very hesitant, resistant to challenging the status quo. And I think that's seeping, that thinking, that mindset is seeping in to our opinions of this program. So let me make this point. You can be against vouchers and for ESAs. You can be against ESAs and for tax credit programs. You can be for some ESA programs and against other ESA programs. The devil is in the detail. And so saying that this won't work because some other very different program that smells the same failed is just entirely, we're giving up before even trying. There's an opportunity to make something in front of us work. Now, I have no doubt that if this survives at least the first couple of years, it's going to evolve, right? We're going to find out what works. We're going to find out what doesn't work. There are going to be legislative tweaks. No one knows in terms of how it's going to be implemented, what will really stick and what won't. There's going to be a lot of learning on the fly. I grant all of that. But to suggest that these new resources that are available for our kids, just because some of it might not go well, that we shouldn't try to make it work, I think is defeatist thinking. It's a scarcity mindset when we should have an expansive conversation with an abundance mindset.
Fair enough.
Okay,
Jonah.
I've never been accused of having a scarcity mindset. But anyway, I think that the thing is, everything that you said, I don't disagree with any of it, okay? You should try. Governors should be open to it. Deb Gist is as able a person in our sector as there is. Evan Marwell is a fantastic entrepreneur. These people are just at the absolute top as innovators, and I'm so glad that they're getting into this. That doesn't change my view of the public policy. And so if we just have a conversation where we can agree that it's worth trying, and you can be critical of or skeptical of the public policy and still think that we should try to maximize it for the benefit of kids and then talk about how to do that, that's productive. But you can't equate skepticism about a tax credit program that requires people who have a certain amount of money because it's not refundable to then check the thing off, and then there's an intermediary, and then the intermediary has to then figure out what to do with it. You can't say that's the best public policy. That's a hard one for me.
Fair
and it
enough.
doesn't. But anyway, I just want to say, I don't disagree with some of the critiques in terms of a lack of expansiveness, and I think some of the there's a lack of focus where it should be in some ways in the debates. But I think that's not necessarily what is happening here.
Fair enough. Let's get into the details a little bit, because I think that will help sort of illuminate our perspective on this forthcoming program. So Lindsay, you've looked at the state programs, right? And there are, as I said initially, there are 17 states that by next school year will allow families, regardless of income, to spend public monies for private schooling, and that will allow about half of the nation's students to participate, which is a striking percentage. So, what does the state's experience with universal choice programs, Lindsay? Tell us about the demographics of the families likely to seek and receive the new federal monies.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, I think 17, 19 by other counts, choice programs across states that are nearly universal or universal by design. There's also, I think, 35 states plus DC have some type of school choice mechanism, either a voucher, a tax credit, ESA. And ESAs are the fastest growing category and increasingly the dominant policy model because of how flexible they are, and they're not just about tuition. I mean, Tom, you keep talking about private school choice. As I said earlier, I mean, I think this is way beyond that. And also, just from a money perspective, I think public schools stand to benefit the most from this. If you're talking about a $1,700 tax credit, one-to-one return, right? One donor providing $1,700 could actually provide tons of high-quality experiences for students. Tutoring, for example, that can cover that. If you're talking about private school tuition, especially if we're talking about focusing on low-income families in some areas, that's like 5 to 10 to 1 donors to cover that. I just don't, and I do think the uptake, your question is about demographics. The uptake, as we've seen in states, usually starts with people who have already chosen alternative schooling models, right? So Arizona, kids that were already in private schools were the first to take the money. But I do think the story that we're seeing is the demographics are shifting quite a bit over time, right? I do think the experience will be the same with the tax credit. I do think kids who are already in private school will probably take advantage first. They have the infrastructure, they understand this, they have people communicating to them now about this opportunity coming. I call it the ready-made market. Also tutors too, for example. Like if you're already working with a family, you're gonna tell them about this coming online. So I do think that those will be the early adopters, early uptake. But we've seen more families take advantage of these. I mean, Arizona now, I would argue that it's not just the wealthy families that are being advantaged here. Florida started with just low-income kids in their program when they moved to universal. It took some time, but we've seen middle and higher-income families taking advantage of this. As I said, I think the tax credit story will be very similar.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona is an outlier, I think, on this issue. It is true that an increasing percentage of the kids availing themselves of the ESAs in that state are public school kids on the one hand, and they are less wealthy. But in general, across the states with these private school programs, the early adopters at least are more affluent, they already have their kids in school, and they're whiter. And the question becomes, what is the public policy goal of this program, of these programs, and to what extent are we approaching the goals that we've set? I mean,
can I just ask a question of Lindsay?
Yeah, I want to add one statistic
sure,
first. In Oklahoma, in the first year of the expansion of that program to universal eligibility, 25% of the scholarship recipients were from families earning over $250,000. But families at that income level comprise only 5% of Oklahoma high schools. So if the demographics evolve over time to provide more opportunities for kids who need them most, that would be great. But that's not where we are in most states now.
Oh, I just had a question because I think, Lindsay, you're making good points, and Tom, about the evolution of choice programs where there is a state funding stream that's available for people to take advantage of, usually an inadequate amount of money. But for this, it's different because only people above a certain income level who have a certain level of taxation can qualify for the tax credit. So what do you see as the mechanism for equity, driving equity for the tax credit?
So it will become a question of how much states want to police this, and they will probably be hamstrung a little bit by what the final regulations say. But the reason why there's the middleman in the way that this is designed is, quite frankly, and many people don't like this answer, people do not want the federal requirements around civil rights, et cetera, to be attached to the money. They want the money to be as flexible as possible. So that's why there's this middleman, because it's not a direct funding source going to families that would have these strings attached. But, and on the front end, it is very unclear about what states are gonna, what ability states will have to like pick and choose SGOs. I think likely Treasury will say, SGO, as long as you meet these financial criteria in the law, you're in. But states really do have an important role to play. And this is where the bully pulpit comes in. This is where passing policies that don't talk about like SGO selection matter a lot, because states will have to make sure, like from a financial standpoint, that the SGOs are following the law, the money is going to eligible families, and it's being used for eligible expenses, right? That's the first thing. Secondly, I'm also arguing when I talk to states, like, set up a required data system that has maximum transparency around these dollars, right? And I know every state's not going to do that, but there is a role, I think, for the states to play to add more accountability, even if it's not front.
What kind of transparency? What data would be collected?
Who's getting the money, where is it going, and what providers are participating in the program. I think as a start, that's very important. You could also add, so like, what are students doing after the program? You're not going to be able to equate, because of the tax credit, this happened, but you could actually add accountability.
Fair enough.
But I'm
One quick follow-up. So, Lindsay, will governors, since you're talking about governors, will they have the ability to determine which students, i.e. students in failing public schools or low-income students, who will be the principal focus of these programs or not?
It's going to be the SGOs. The SGOs are going to determine what priorities. They can prioritize certain students, they can prioritize certain services, so they could say, we're just doing low income, we're just doing public school options, and the state can use the bully pulpit. I don't believe they're going to be able to limit.
So to what extent is the bully pulpit going to be effective if they really have no authority to dictate who will participate in the program?
Well, I mean, it matters in terms of where the governors are telling people to direct their money, right? They could say, these are my favorite SGOs, and if they're constantly talking about it, people are going to give to the SGOs that they know exist. Like small mom and pops no one's talking about that maybe do private school choice, they're not going to have enough money or resources to make an impact.
But
Right.
I'm still not hearing the answer around how would the mechanism, because you said in some states it's empirical. In the beginning, private school families are the ones who get the voucher or the ESA. Okay. And then over time, some states, not all, have gotten more equitable from an income point of view and racial point of view in terms of who's using the voucher. There's huge issues around whether the kids even can go to a private school, whether they can get admitted, whether the school is good in those states, but just even literally taking advantage. When you talk about a tax credit, I'm just not seeing the mechanism to create more equity over time, which is your earlier point. You were equating the trend in vouchers to the trend in how the tax credit will play out, but it won't work the same, because the only people who can give the tax credit money, by definition, are people who have a level of tax to pay. And then the organizations that are going to be most organized are the ones that are already set up to fund private schools. So how will that not reinforce inequity?
So if I may, I mean, I just want to make sure, the conversation we're having is, how do we make this work? Not should we opt in or should we not? We're all right, there are a number of issues that we need to address. How do we proactively address them? And that's where I think the structure of the program makes such a big difference. Remember that this is funded by the individual decisions that you and I and all of us, hundreds of thousands, if not tens of millions of Americans, will be making each year. And so, assuming that the infrastructure exists to support SGOs that service public school kids in the same way that SGOs exist that support private school kids, I think to myself, who am I going to give to? Who are we going to give to? If 90% of kids still study in traditional public schools, if most of us went to traditional public schools, I'd think that most of us are going to give to SGOs that are supporting the kids that go to schools that we have some kind of connection to, that we're affiliated with. So that's just sort of thinking, that sort of how I think the logic would go. But we also started asking this in some of our public polling. And initial results are showing that at least 72% of people who say that they will give to an SGO will prefer to give to an SGO that supports public school kids. And so the question is like, all right, how do we provide the infrastructure? How do we provide the mechanisms to make it as easy as possible for families, for folks like me and you, to make the contributions? Coming back to the question about the governor, I think governors have an incredibly important role to play here. No one is a more important, no one has a bigger sort of perch from which to speak to as a policymaker than do governors. And governors have an important role to play in raising awareness that this program even exists. They have an incredibly important role to play in raising awareness among potential SGOs, any youth service organizations that could form SGOs. What kind of support are we providing to them? You know, what kind of awareness are we raising that the work that these SGOs are doing are aligning with my priorities as a governor? No one has, no one has the megaphone quite the same way that the governor has. So and for governors that really lean into this, they can directly influence where these dollars are going to go.
Fair point. There are 27 states that have opted into the program already. All but 2 of those are Republican-led states. Do you think, Jorge, that those red state governors are going to use their bully pulpits to promote funding into the public sector, or will they just be silent on the grounds that it should be individuals who make a decision to where they should put their money?
They will absolutely lean into it and try to direct contributions to the SGOs that align with their priorities, in the same way that blue state governors should be doing the exact same thing.
I would say that most of the red state governors' priorities are aligning with the notion of using public funds to support private schooling.
I disagree with that.
Well, I'll let you take the disagree part, and I'll take the, again, we're not ideological about anything other than what delivers for kids. And somehow the conversation on the left for a long time has been, somehow we've concluded that the only way we can deliver on the needs of children is through this very top-down, bureaucratic, rigid system that's modeled on a 19th century factory. We need to break out of that fundamental assumption. Yeah, I just reject that assumption. We need to be open to different ways to meet families' needs. And, I'm so excited about, this entire conference, build, I think it's like, let's build what comes next, build what, the bottom-up innovation that I see, community-driven micro schools that are emerging in states that are embracing, a broader range of options. There are more ways to meet the needs of kids and families than through this traditional public school system based on factories.
And I think that we should be open to that. I don't think anybody in this room is disputing that assertion.
Well,
Lindsay.
Lindsay. Hold on.
No, please, we got to move.
I got you. The suggestion that somehow supporting private schools is bad was one of the assumptions that we need to get over.
Yeah, and I mean, just quickly, red state priorities are not just private school choice. I mean, look at literacy, like where science of reading bills are passing. It's a lot of red states. Red states are leading on ed reform right now, if we're just being honest, right? Communities and schools that provides integrated student supports is mostly in red states, right? That have direct funding lines for these type of things after school. So I do not believe that they will use the megaphone to just say, this is for private school choice. I don't believe it. And most of their constituents are not in private school, so they have to make this work for everybody.
Fair enough. Appreciate that perspective. So, Jorge, are there any requirements in the legislation or anything that you've heard from folks at Treasury regarding the regs that would require SGOs to ensure that the providers that they pick, and they will play a sort of key role in this process, right? SGOs will collect the money from individuals seeking tax credits. They will give the money to parents, maybe not directly, but then they will also determine who the providers will be, whether they're private schools or tutoring organizations, or maybe in some instances, public school districts that partner with SGOs to provide services to public school kids directly, which I think is your aspiration. But is there anything that we know now that would require evidence of success, of improvement in student achievement under the program?
I don't anticipate anything like that coming out of a Trump treasury. And so how do we troubleshoot for that? How do we ensure that these resources are being used in ways that actually are delivering results? And, every SGO is going to design their own program. So there'll be SGOs that focus on, tutoring. There'll be SGOs that focus on private school tuition. There'll be SGOs that focus on particular neighborhoods. There'll be SGOs that focus on a range of different issues. Again, they have to earn our contribution every single year. And I think that, and SGOs will have to stand out one from the next. I think there's going to be a very strong incentive for SGOs to make the case year after year that they are delivering results. And so what kind of infrastructure is required to make sure that potential donors like you and I can make informed decisions? That's a legitimate question to which it's an invitation. Well, let's build it, right? Let's build that infrastructure so that we can make these decisions. The last thing that I'll say about this is that, we live and breathe this every single day, and everyone who's like living and breathing it will tell you that everything that we say, we speak with a certain level of humility about it, because no one knows exactly how this program is going to work. And once it's implemented, what's going to stick and what isn't. I think we can give it our best shot, and these conversations are really important. But this is really a broader invitation to the entire community. Let's build in that infrastructure so that either immediately or over time, it more and more delivers for kids.
And you feel comfortable promoting participation on the part of mostly Democratic governors at this point, because most of the Republicans are in already, despite the fact that we don't have the Treasury regs and we don't have a clear picture of what's coming down the path?
Yes, because it's all additive, right? So for governors, the question, as I see it, is just so incredibly simple. If you opt out, then by default, the first $1,700 of every single federal taxpayer's federal taxes will leave your state. And it's going to go to the Treasury in the form of taxes into that black hole. If you opt in, you give your state the opportunity to recoup as many of these resources as possible, and not just recoup these dollars, but put them to use to align with your priorities. Why wouldn't we do that?
And one other thing, too, I think, Tom, your question presupposes that the regulations are going to answer these questions. They're not. Treasury tax people do not think about accountability for this. This is how do we prevent fraud and make this system work, right? Not from are these dollars doing good? It's there's a tax credit, we have to implement it. So I think governors have to play a major role regardless. So, I think it's fun, and the governors need to start now to communicate that this opportunity is coming, because guess what? It's law, right? So I think that in order to maximize the participation, the communication coming from them will have to happen regardless of what the regs say.
Fair point. Jonah, are you concerned about the capacity of SGOs, which sort of are the centerpiece of this program, to police providers, to ensure that there will be quality services provided to students?
I think giving money out, just as anyone in the room is in philanthropy, is challenging. To find really high quality nonprofits and ensure that they're getting results. It's challenging, and I think there'll be some that do a really good job of choosing what programs they fund. I would think if I'm running a really good program, I want to get involved in this in some way, shape, or form. If I'm running a school district, I want to be involved in this in some way, shape, or form. It absolutely is an opportunity. I think it'll take a heck of a lot of work to try to, get a certain number of $1,700 tax credits to add up to an amount that makes it even worthwhile. I question whether that, the ROI is going to be there, especially when you take 10% off the top, for admin. But look, I mean, if I were communities and schools right now, I'd be thinking about how to do this. Of course. That doesn't make it good public policy. I feel like I'm saying the same thing, so I'll stop.
Yeah. I mean, I think Jorge's point that, and you just made it again, Jonah, that the market, if we can inform consumers, will create positive incentives in this program. That is, that SGOs that identify and work with high quality providers, whether it's private schools or tutoring companies, et cetera, right? And are willing, and those SGOs are willing to demand evidence of performance, then that will be a signaling function that will attract more donations, right?
Yeah, it's probably, but Tom, if you think about it, it's probably brands that are already somewhat known. So like a local schools foundation. If you're running a local schools foundation and you're currently doing this already, you're getting donations and people get a tax deduction.
Yep.
Essentially, you're in the best position because you're already doing it, right? And you're, instead of saying give the money to get a tax deduction, you're saying give this amount of money, you get a tax credit.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're going to get incrementally more dollars, in those entities directed to public schools. But maybe there will be some mega SEOs that are just so good at marketing that they can break through. This is a very hard era, as we all know, to break through and get people's attention. So the notion that some new SGO is going to come out of the blue and, if they're philanthropically stood up and they have a massive amount of money, then I go back to the ROI question, because the amount of money that would be needed to get an SGO to get brand recognition would probably be better invested directly into programs for kids.
Fair enough. And it is true, as you're suggesting, that the nation's biggest SGOs, those that have been around the longest and have the most experience with this complicated work, right? Because you're moving money in multiple directions. You've got multiple relationships with donors, with families, with providers. They have been set up primarily to support the flow of public monies to private schools under the state programs. So the one big question is whether they will be willing to bring providers into their orbits that would focus on public school students.
Lindsay, what do you think about that one?
Yeah, I mean, again, the structure of the program makes the biggest difference. If those SGOs are not serving public school kids, then let's not send our money to them. And let's send them to the SGOs that are serving the families that we want to reach.
Right.
The same point about, I've heard critiques that, the program is no good because it serves kids up to 300% AMI. I mean, I just personally find it hard to believe that tens of millions of Americans that we're going to send our $1,700 to the SGOs that are serving the least needy families. I mean, I just don't think that. I think most of us, most Americans, we're going to send the money to the SGOs that are serving the families that need it the most.
Well, I think
that align with our values.
What's the analog that gives you confidence that this would get to scale in terms of people actually doing the tax credit? Just, is there any analog that you can draw on? Because like the notion of tens of millions of families, first of all, I'm not sure how many people actually have a $1,700 tax bill, just starting just there. How many's there? And then what's the evidence of any other program where, because like you think about the Trump, what is that, the Trump accounts? Like what percentage in California do you think of families opted into the Trump account? Free money. What percentage? 12%. Okay, that's free money. And then interviewing families, the reason why is they don't trust government. And these are people that get the money. So it seems like there's a lot of friction there that I'm not sure is being taken into account.
So we estimate there's going to be 47 million Americans with at least $1,700 in federal taxes each year, and that's a very conservative estimate. The number is definitely more than 47 million Americans, and these are folks who making the $1,700 contribution costs them nothing. Right? It's just a matter of redirecting it. Either my money goes to the black hole in Washington, or it goes to an SGO that's doing cool work in my community.
But wait, it does cost them something, though.
And so if we minimize the friction, and again, no one knows exactly what's going to stick and what's going to work, but we make it as easy as possible for people to redirect their dollars. I do anticipate that over time, a significant number of Americans are going to participate in this program.
But just to be clear, mechanically, you have to have $1,700 that you can donate, and you don't need it for a certain number of months, because then you fill out your taxes and then you get it back at a certain point.
No. Again, no one knows exactly how this is going to work, but folks are talking to, say, the ADPs of the world, and so you can, if we engage employers, they can deduct it from our weekly paycheck, and so to us we feel nothing, right? The money is going to be deducted regardless. Either it's for federal tax withholdings or it's for $1,700 for our contribution. Again, no one knows exactly how it's going to happen, and we have to figure out how do we make it as frictionless and as easy as possible. But it costs us nothing.
But wait, $60 a paycheck.
And folks will participate.
$60 a paycheck for some people, that means something.
No, it's going to be withdrawn anyways out of your federal tax withholdings. So instead of it going to tax withholdings, it goes to
Lindsay.
the
No, I think Jonah's right on this. Like you do fundamentally lose something by whether or not you need is a different argument, like who the populations are. But Jonah is right that you do lose something by giving. Whether it's not a values judgment. Fundamentally, fact, you do lose something by giving the credit.
So we're going to go to questions in just a second. So please be thinking of them. But I want to ask you, Jorge, to pivot slightly. So you've talked about the potential of this program, the importance of the program to support public school students, whether they're in charter schools or traditional district-run schools. How would that work? What are the mechanics of where the money would go, the relationships between the SGOs in order for that to happen? Because the simplest way for a public school kid to participate is to get money from an SGO and then spend it wherever they want, right? Private tutoring, go to a private school or whatever, right? But you're implying, and we've had this discussion, that actually some of the money can be cycled into public school districts or charter management organizations. How does that work?
So I think there are two ways that it could potentially work. I start off thinking about the United Ways of the world. I can imagine, say a United Way really wants to participate in this program. They could participate as potentially an SGO themselves. So you make the contributions directly to the SGO. To the United Way. And the United Way, they create a platform where you can make the contribution. Maybe through the same platform, families apply. Maybe through this same platform, you match families/students with tutors. So I can imagine a world where, a United Way of the world or, Big Brother, Big Sister, they're the SGO and it all goes through them. I could also imagine a world where, again, let's say United Way doesn't want to be the SGO, but they want to be, say, the aggregator, right? And I think Jonah is right in terms of, you're going to need trusted brands, brand names in a community. And so I could see the United Way setting up a portal. And through this portal, I, as a taxpayer, instead of giving to the United Way as the SGO, perhaps I go through the United Way's portal and they help me find an SGO that aligns with my priorities. So it can happen through that. And I think Lindsay or maybe Jonah mentioned, the payment processing services. They're going to play a really critical role in this. And I think that they have the potential to scratch three separate itches. First is making it easy to make the contributions. Second, it's providing the portal for families to apply directly. And then third, making sure that vendors get paid directly. Many states that we've spoken to, they have the question, we're not getting any money to administer this, to implement it. How's it going to happen? I think these payment processors are going to play a critical role.
Thank you. Questions?
Can follow up on that same question? I'd love to hear your thoughts, Lindsay, about how does the money end up, this is a critical question, if you're in it for public school students. Are we waiting, are the feds going to write rules, or is the governor going to write rules about that question, that answers that question? In other words, can a school, public does that have to happen? And if so, does it have to happen after school? Can it happen during school? Can it already get funded for kids to do a certain set of things in the school day? That's a critical question, I think, for the, because I share the goal that Jorge has laid out and the ambition about it, but this is a curious wondering.
I don't believe that the rules will answer these questions, right? The rules are basically going to say, what are the qualifying factors to be an SGO? Serve at least 10 kids that go to more than one school. You're a nonprofit. They're not gonna like talk about this, I believe. But my answer is similar to Jorge in the sense that if I'm a public school district and I want to take advantage of this, I will set up a nonprofit SGO that says these are the options that families who donate to me. These are the options that the money can go for, and they'll all be either provided by the school or a partner of the school, and that will just be it, right? And then you do the marketing campaign to get families to donate to that. But that's basically how it will work.
There is one other model. So I was speaking to an SGO leader recently who said that he plans to partner with public school districts who would, he's focused on tutoring, who would identify students who need tutoring. He would also identify vetted tutoring providers that the public school district or the charter CMO could select as the tutorer of choice for its students. The SGO would then pay the providers directly, so that's another model. Which is interesting about that is that it essentially takes parents out of the equation, right? So the money would go from the donors to the SGO to the providers, and the only involvement that parents would have would be to say yes, thank you, or no thank you to the school district that has offered their child an opportunity to receive tutoring.
But
Fair?
I don't believe under any of the models the parents are going to get money directly. Like it's always they're going to have to opt in to say this is how the money can be used, like based on what the SGO is providing, but they're not getting the money directly.
Okay, fair point.
But the early part of the law said, as I know, as I read, we've done a lot of planning for our organization. Right?
Yeah.
My understanding is that the SGO, yes, in control of the market creation of services, not in control, not able to reserve the scholarship for particular students. So
But-
if I open up the market, I build the market, I open myself up, I raise the money, I'm ready to execute. But let's say private school families, I can't differentiate, I can't discriminate against private school families. Right?
No, so the original request for information that came out said, well, basically, the SGOs can choose what activities and to prioritize certain students. You can't earmark for a specific student means donor X says this money is for Jonah Edelman. Like you can't, like that can't happen, but they can absolutely set priorities and limitations as long as they're not in violation of the law.
Right. Yes.
So I'm superintendent of a large school district in Tennessee. We advocated for this to be included in the budget bill by the legislature. You know, my thoughts are I hear the concerns about branding and competition and things like that, but at the same time, you know, I have 6,000 employees, or we have 6,000 employees. We have a database of roughly 60 to 70,000 parents we could communicate with instantly. Are there models for us to be able to create the type of SGO to drive that for a school system? I think charters would be very similar in that setup. I think, you know, we've got all these questions about it, but are there examples of models of how we would set that SGO up for a large traditional public school district?
I mean, my sense, Lindsay, you've been following this closely, but I mean, my sense is that you could, if you have a public education foundation, you could designate that foundation to be an SGO. It would solicit funds, and by the way, there is going to be intense competition among SGOs for monies, and that's why the big ones that exist will have first mover advantage. But so, say you're successful in communicating with your multiple thousands of families, and encourage them to avail themselves of the tax credit, put the money in, and direct the money to your foundation. Then the SGO, presumably working closely with you, could determine where the money would be spent. In the back.
Yeah, I want to understand what the rules are a little bit more for SGOs. Thank you. For SGOs to distribute money. It sounds like there's not a lot of rules. Suppose, as a priority, an SGO said, our focus is white middle-class kids. We want to only give money to that group. And I don't agree with Jorge that that won't happen.
They won't say it that way. They'll say it's for these three private schools
Sure.
that are lily white.
Right. So how does this not contribute to educational inequity? Because we all agree that the factory model of schools is whack, but at the same time, there's accountability there. And those schools have to educate every child. Private schools do not.
Yes.
So how do we keep that from getting worse under this bill?
Jorge.
So the way, actually, thank you for teeing that up. The way that we can prevent that from happening is by leaning in and building the infrastructure so that the SGOs serving public school kids are set up and ready to go. And we're raising awareness that these programs exist so that we send our money to them.
So that doesn't answer the question. That's a question around the proportionality, which is very important. So like, superintendent here, you're the best case scenario. And so I hope you and your peers around the country and all the CMO leaders here set up SGOs and knock it out of the park. And there's some intermediaries that help you quickly do best practices, but it's similar to like passing a school levy or bond, right? You have the machinery. So that's great. But the accountability question is a whole separate question. There's going to be no accountability as to what happens
There's
with the
going to
money.
be no formal, like sort of like imposed.
There will be
but-
no accountability.
No, but I'm not going to send my money. I'm not going to send my $1,700 year after year to a program that's not delivering results. There will be the public will provide the accountability for the program.
You know, it's not the same. It's basically the same as like the Red Cross says, we did this with your donations, thank you so much, and why people keep giving or not. That's fine. But Lindsay gave the example earlier about the red states that have done the best. They've done the best because in some cases they're investing in evidence-based practices with transparency and accountability. Right? That's the mix that actually works. Boring, not ideological, doesn't work on the far right, but that's actually what works. And that's not happening in certain other states, you know, that are not red. But that is not an analogy to what we're talking about here.
You know, I just want to stress the point that this is an imperfect law. It is what we have, and it'll evolve over time. And this is an invitation to problem solve.
I completely agree. All I was doing is just trying to correct the notion that there is going to be accountability. Yep. The superintendent, I hope you knock it out of the park and you get millions and millions of additional dollars that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten. And you put those to good use. That's great. CMO leaders, David, I don't know, you're in New York, so maybe you'll not, but I don't know. But I hope you do it if you can get the opportunity if your governor opts in. It's a great opportunity, but I'm just trying to not allow things to be said unchecked that are not they don't have merit, which is the notion that this is going to be accountability. There might be money, and the money might go to good things, but there is no systematic accountability built into this.
On that note, we have to stop. Sorry, because I'm losing my voice, it seems. But I want to thank Lindsay and Jonah and Jorge because as you can see, this is a fraught issue, and we often don't have thoughtful, engaged conversations amongst folks in our field who have different points of view, and this is really important. So kudos to them for engaging.